Thank you for that music, Mr. Southwest Chair. I appreciate it. Good afternoon to some, good morning to others. I'm Ebony Cormier, and I'm here to host the panel today for corporate counsel and legal operations. So we'll go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Ebony Cormier. I serve as the National Director of Corporate Engagement for the National Black Law Student Association. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'll kick it off with my introduction. So I am the two-term National Director of Corporate Engagement for NABOSA. I'm a third-year part-time evening student at Southern University Law Center. And prior to law school, I worked 17 years in financial services, with the majority of that time spent as an AVP and operations manager and consultant at Bank of America. Since I've been in law school, I've interned at several tech companies, including NetApp and Knowable. I've completed a federal judicial internship, and I'm currently a commercial litigation intern at HP. I'll be starting at a firm in Scottsdale, Arizona as a summer associate in May. But I'm excited about this panel because we get to touch on what being corporate counsel is and the varying roles and responsibilities of in-house counsel. We'll also discuss legal operations and differentiate legal operations from other roles of corporate in-house counsel. Additionally, we'll talk about the different pathways that our panelists took to go in-house, and some of which included clerking, big law, government, and some international experience. So with that, let me begin with our introduction with Ms. Dia Priya Anga, who's corporate counsel at Amazon in Seattle, Washington. Dia Priya is corporate counsel. Prior to joining Amazon, she worked at Aluko and Oyebode in Lagos, Nigeria, and Arnold and Porter Case Stoller in New York and DC. She received her JD and graduate certificate in global human rights from the University of Pennsylvania in 2014, and a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Villanova University in 2011. While at Penn State, she was the Director of International Relations for the National Black Law Students Association. In October 2015, she received the Young Alumni Award from Villanova's College of Liberal Arts and Sciences in recognition of her pro bono legal work and community service activities all over the world, including in the US, UK, Jamaica, Peru, and Nigeria.
She can't hear you.
Look, TT.
I'm sorry, can I get everyone to mute? Thank you. In addition to Dia Priya's law practice, she's passionate about international development, health and wellness, international travel, modern African literature, and photography. So welcome. And let me go ahead and pin all of our panelists. Okay, our next panelist is Jean Lee. Jean Lee is president and CEO of Minority Corporate Counsel Association, a national organization focused on hiring, promoting, and retaining women and diverse attorneys by providing cutting-edge research, best practices, training. Jean Lee is the president and chief executive officer of the Minority Corporate Counsel Association, the leading national diversity, equity, and inclusion organization for the legal profession. MCCA is focused on recruiting, retaining, and promoting women and diverse attorneys by providing cutting-edge research, best practices, toolkits, professional development, and training. Prior to joining MCCA, Ms. Lee served as vice president and assistant general counsel at JP Morgan Chase & Co., where she worked on consumer litigation and regulatory matters. Before joining JP Morgan Chase & Co. in 2011, Ms. Lee worked on litigation matters at a boutique litigation firm in New York City and started her career as a law clerk to the Honorable John J. Hughes, United States Magistrate Judge in the District of New Jersey. She graduated from New York University with a BA in politics and psychology and an MSW in social work. Ms. Lee received her JD from Rutgers University School of Law, where she was a senior editor of the Rutgers Law Record. In 2014, the Council of Urban Professionals recognized Ms. Lee as a catalyst, change agent, law, and in 2015, she was recognized as a trailblazer by the Korean American Lawyers Association of Greater New York. Currently, she serves on the Select Committee for the Legends in Law Award for the Burton Foundation and as an advisor to law firms and corporate legal departments. Welcome, Ms. Lee. We also have Jessica Ortiz, who currently serves as the Deputy Inspector General and Director of Investigations for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. In this capacity, she oversees an office of over 170 staff who are responsible for investigating allegations of fraud, corruption, waste, and abuse with respect to employees or other individuals or organizations doing business with the Port Authority who attempt to corrupt or unlawfully interfere with Port Authority operations. Prior to joining the Port Authority, Ms. Ortiz was a partner at Molo Lampkin LLP, a boutique litigation firm. She represented companies and individuals in high-stakes civil litigation and white-collar criminal and regulatory investigations and enforcement actions brought by the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and other federal and state regulators. She was also called upon to conduct corporate internal investigations in the US and abroad and to advise clients on crisis and risk management. Ms. Ortiz routinely appeared in state and federal courts handling all phases of civil and criminal litigation, including motion practice and trials. Ms. Ortiz also served as an assistant United States attorney in the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, where she served for over 8 years, ending her tenure as chief of the narcotics unit. In the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ms. Ortiz supervised investigations and prosecutions of domestic and international money laundering, narcotics conspiracies and distribution, healthcare fraud, and misconduct by physicians and medical practitioners involving prescription drugs and violent crimes. Prior to her supervisory appointment, Ms. Ortiz investigated and prosecuted a wide range of federal crimes, including bank, mail, and wire fraud, computer crimes and misuse, corporate theft, public corruption, racketeering and organized crime, as well as murder, assault, narcotics, trafficking, stalking, threats, robbery, and kidnapping. In her courtroom work at the U.S. Attorney's Office, Ms. Ortiz led 15 jury trials to conviction as lead counsel, including a 3-month RICO enterprise trial stemming from a 76 defendant prosecution. In addition to her successful trial work, Ms. Ortiz has extensive appellate experience, having briefed 8 and argued 3 appeals before the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Ms. Ortiz previously practiced securities litigation at Weil, Gosshall, and Manges, LLP. Ms. Ortiz also clerked for the Honorable Julio M. Fuentes for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Prior to law school, Ms. Ortiz was a senior technology security associate for the Global Risk Management Service at PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP. In addition to her service with the HBA-NJ, she is also the chair of the selection committee for the When There Are 9 Scholarship Project, a scholarship and mentoring initiative to increase the number of women in the legal profession. Welcome, Ms. Ortiz. She also lives in New Jersey with her 2 children and husband. And last but certainly not least, we have Elizabeth Hassan, who is an international lawyer with the expertise in governance and policy, sovereign financing, and international institutional law. Elizabeth Hassan is the senior counsel for the OPEC Fund for International Development in Vienna, Austria, formerly known as former World Bank Council. She currently works for the OPEC Fund for International Development, where she managed the first comprehensive governance review and is also leading the development and implementation of key policies under the new strategic framework, as well as the legal documentation for new sovereign financing products. Previously, Elizabeth worked with the World Bank, first on operations policy and later as a transactional lawyer. She has also worked with Elix, one of Nigeria's leading commercial and arbitration law firms. Elizabeth holds an LLB from the University of of Jos, Nigeria, an advanced law degree from Nigerian Law School, Lagos, and an LLM from New York University, where she was awarded an International Finance and Development Fellowship and also selected for an exchange course at Columbia University. She is currently conducting a PhD program in governance and policy analysis at the United Nations University. Elizabeth sits on the board of the Association of Lawyers in Intergovernmental Finance and Development Organizations and has authored various publications, including in Global Administrative Law, The Casebook. Elizabeth was the production editor of the World Bank Legal Review, Volume 5. She is licensed to practice law in Nigeria and New York. Wow, welcome to this amazing panel. Just reading you all of your bios, I'm just honored to even be in the same room. So we'll go ahead and get started. Tell us about your journey to where you are today. We'll start with Elizabeth and go from there.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good day, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be part of this panel. I'm excited to discuss with other panelists and also hear from our audience. In terms of career, I mean, my career started in Nigeria at the law firm, and I specialized in corporate law and also intellectual property. And when I got into development finance, when I decided to do my LLM at NYU, and I focused on international legal studies. And from there, of course, I got the fellowship and I was posted to the World Bank. And this is essentially how I got into in-house counsel work. And really the road getting there was, for me, it wasn't like quite definitive in the sense there was no defining moment. I essentially just followed my interest and the opportunities that I was presented with at any point in time. So while I was working, for example, when I was at NYU, I was talking, of course, to our career services office, trying to get a sense of what my next steps would be. And I got a chance to talk to two different mentors now, and they didn't know each other. You know, one was a director at a center at NYU. The other one was a partner at Big Law in New York. And I talked to them about my interests, and both of them, you know, were like, "Why don't you work with organizations like the World Bank?" And I thought, okay, well, I was always interested in community work and development and all, but I really quite never thought about being an in-house counsel. But, you know, two different people randomly told me that I should look into the space. And I thought, okay, well, it's worth exploring. And I had an opportunity to do that because the NYU had a fellowship program that they would award to an LLM student. So I applied for it. And I tried also to keep a second leg in my comfortable zone, which was intellectual property. So I also applied for a fellowship at the World Intellectual Property Organization, and I was selected for both fellowships. And then, so of course, it was now a decision to which path to go. And then for me, naturally, it was really about what I was really interested in. The work of the World Bank really is development at the ground level, community level. So it was a no-brainer for me. And that's how I got to where I was today. From there, I moved to my current organization where the mandate is more or less similar. And so I've pretty much been in-house since then, and I'm really loving it.
Thank you for sharing that, Elizabeth. And I noted that you said a few people mentioned it to you. So sometimes we have to listen to those around us. Dia Priya, can you tell us about, and let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name, can you tell us about your journey into corporate counsel?
Sure thing. Thank you for having me. So I'll start from the beginning because I think it's kind of closer to where a lot of people in Nabalsa are now. But I studied political science at Villanova, and I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer, so that was never in doubt for me. So I went straight through to the University of Pennsylvania Law School, where I was laying the foundation, I thought, for what I hoped would be an international career. So I wasn't necessarily focused on what in the international law space, but I just knew I wanted to have something of an international career. So when I was in law school, which is where I know a lot of people are now, I was very focused on making sure I got both kind of corporate and, whether human rights, pro bono, international experience. I was on the Journal for International Law. I was Director of International Relations for NABALSA, which was an amazing time. And I also did an externship at Amnesty International in New York. So having done all of that, I thought, okay, so what do I do next? And I decided to start my career in big law in New York, where I was a litigator at Arnold & Porter, where I focused on commercial litigation and white collar investigations. The reason for that being, I thought, okay, this is a wonderful way to get those foundational legal skills in terms of just written and oral advocacy and also commercial awareness, because remember, I hadn't worked before. And so I thought, okay, this is a good starting point. After a while, I moved to the DC office of Arnold & Porter because I thought, okay, New York was fantastic and very commercial, but DC was more international, is closer to the government and all whatnot. So that was kind of moving closer towards my goal. But after a while, I thought, okay, this is all fantastic. What do I want to do next? And I decided to move to Nigeria, which was, a bit of a leap of faith because I would be starting over in some sense, but not so really. So I went to Nigeria and I took the bar there. I was in the Nigerian law school there for 1.5 years. And then I joined big law there. And I switched completely and I started doing capital markets, private equity, and M&A. Mostly because I was interested in doing kind of deals in an emerging market. So I'm interested in international development, and I thought what better way to gain skills in that area than to do the deals. That was a fantastic experience. And I was in Nigeria for 4 years before I moved back last year and I joined Amazon. Again, because having kind of practiced for, at that point, it was 6-7 years, and having been on the other side of the table and providing legal advice to clients, I thought, well, I want to be a client, first of all. but beyond that, I wanted to join a global company. And of course, Amazon is that e-commerce, and it's doing wonderful things all around the world. So that's kind of how I made that transition. So at every stage, I was just thinking, have I gained the skills that I wanted to gain at this stage? And then what do I want to do next? So that's where I am now. And I just provide day-to-day legal advice to the business that I support. And it's been a wonderful kind of stretch experience for me.
Thank you for sharing. And next we'll go to Jessica Ortiz. Tell us about your journey, very, very storied journey into corporate counsel.
Thanks, Ebony, and thank you to my co-hosts and NABALSA for hosting us today. You're right. I guess if I had to describe my journey to where I am today, it has been a journey of diverse experiences, different experiences, and perhaps not a linear one, which is something that I think I want to emphasize to the students today, which is there isn't one direct path to get in-house, to get to being corporate counsel. And I think that, what makes me a great lawyer now within an organization, a corporate entity, are those different experiences, the ability to see things from different perspectives. So you sort of went through my bio. I don't want to spend time reiterating it. I've done a lot of different things. I think I always knew that I had some interest in the corporate world, in being counsel to corporate. And that was probably before law school, which was, you sort of go back to my experience in both undergrad. I got a business degree. I also worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and that was really for me the foundation before I even walked into law school. I had some ambivalence when I did get to law school about whether I would do corporate work or not, but I always kept it on the table. I think my biggest piece of advice is to pursue everything that you're interested in, and corporations and corporate law was just one aspect of what I pursued. And very similar to Diapre, when I got out of law school, I went to big law. I thought that was a great foundation, but quickly realized after clerking that I wanted to be a litigator. I enjoyed litigation work very much. I enjoyed the courtroom, and so a significant portion of my career I spent in criminal law, and it for the most part was really not the type of criminal law that corporations encounter. But once I decided to leave the prosecutor's office, the U.S. Attorney's office, I was able to pivot very easily back into corporate law. And the reason I think for that, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about this, is because being a lawyer is certainly about having a substantive expertise, but it's also about being able to analyze and have analytical skills and applying certain skills to a subject matter area. And so, while I had not done internal investigations before becoming a partner at the law firm, I had done investigation, I had done criminal investigations, I had done government investigations. And so, there was a learning curve, certainly, and there still is a learning curve. And I think that's part of being a lawyer, is every time you do something new, you're learning new things. But those fundamental skills are so important to me. And so here I am now, several years later, serving as the Deputy Inspector General, which works very closely with the General Counsel at the Port Authority of New York. But really, my focus is really what are investigations on behalf of the Port Authority.
Thank you for sharing your story, and we'll put a pin in that and come back to some of those things you want to discuss. And we have Ms. Jean Lee. Not only is she corporate counsel, but she is the CEO. So tell us about that journey, Jean.
And again, thanks to Ebony and the Black Law Students Association for having me here today, and with this great distinguished panel. So I don't want to go too much into my background, because you can read that in the bio, but one of the things that inspired me to become a lawyer is because I'm a first generation immigrant. I came when I was almost 9 years old, and experience at that time, there weren't as many Asian Americans in that community in Philadelphia at the time, although there was a growing number. So I experienced a lot of discrimination and racism. So I was always interested in how society treated people, even at a very young age, which is one of the reasons why I first went to get my master's in social work. I practiced as a licensed social worker, clinical psychology therapist with that degree, probably for about 3 years, in various roles. First as a clinician, then as a legal aid forensic social worker working with juveniles in the Juvenile Rights Division. And then what I realized even more as a professional was that society does treat people very, very differently. And that also inspired me, because at that time, social workers were doing a lot of amazing work for society and our communities, but they were not the ones who were changing systems. Lawyers had an opportunity to change systems, whether it's through legislation, impact litigation, et cetera. And that's what really inspired me to ultimately go to law school. Besides the fact that when I was 9 and they ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you had to choose doctor or lawyer. I was like, I don't like blood, so lawyer. So besides that part, where I was told I'm going to be a lawyer, and every single time my parents saw any of their friends, she's going to be a lawyer. It really, truly came about in graduate school, and also as I was practicing as a social worker. And ultimately, I went to law school and clerked for a federal magistrate judge and wanted to do public interest work. But I graduated at a time that 9/11 happened, and the job market was very scarce. So I struggled a bit. I temped. I really wanted to be at a nonprofit. No nonprofit really had funding at the time, given what was happening in the world and in the country. And so one of the things, I know we're going to talk about this later, that I would encourage everyone to do is always follow your passion, but don't rule out things that you've never experienced. So I ended up going into private practice. And if you asked me then, I would have said, no, there's no way, because I was so committed to public interest law, but I had to pay bills, I had to pay student loans. And I absolutely loved being in private practice. And I actually spent almost, a very short 8 months, I think, at the Port Authority early in my career. I also realized that I really liked learning and working, which is why I also went to more litigation work at the time. And then ultimately, in 2016, I was on the board as a volunteer board member for MCCA. They were looking for their new president and CEO. And I said no initially, because I knew how much of the work required and how much of you had to really put yourself into making that change. But it was 2016. I expected at the time, naively so, that we would have our first woman president in 2016. That, of course, was not true. But that was one of the reasons why I was inspired to leave JP Morgan to lead the MCCA. And I no longer really practice lawyering, although I have my license still, at least in New York. And that's really what my journey has been, is about taking calculated risks and where I can learn. I think a lot of us talked about that here on this panel already, the opportunity to learn, the opportunity to give back. And in this role, I absolutely love my job. It is not the same every day. It is very different every day. And my job is to really break down some of the systemic barriers that have kept people who look like us down, and where the opportunities really did not exist, despite commitments from leadership, CEOs, and the like that said that we are going to create opportunities. Our job as an organization is to really hold that mirror up to those leaders to make sure that they're keeping their promise, along with many other amazing organizations. So that's a little bit about my background. And again, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Jane. And I love the mission of MCCA. Thank you for the work that you do. Let's take it back a little bit to internships and kind of the steps that you took, because a lot of the students, they ultimately want to go in-house. They want to do the work that you all are doing. And so tell me about any internships or opportunities that you took advantage of while you were in law school or early in your career that kind of was a stepping stone to get you where you are today. And we'll start with Elizabeth.
Sure, thanks, Ebony. I mean, I had a lot of internships, right? And, you know, when we're in school, we used to have this joke when we're looking to get into the labor market. We're like, well, I can't get a job because I don't have work experience. I don't have work experience because I can't get a job. And it's like a vicious circle, right? And you're in law school, what I will tell you is you definitely want to get as much work experience as you want, right? The being in law school gives you the opportunity or the advantage of taking different kinds of risks, right? You know, you have the opportunity to try out things, to know what you like, to gain experience. And I did all of that. So I interned at the Nigerian National Human Rights Commission. I interned with a law firm in Nigeria, a big law firm in Nigeria. I interned at the court. When I was at NYU, I interned for the Center for Global Human Rights and Global Justice. And I mean, I tried it all, right? All the things were, of course, designed towards areas I was interested in. So human rights, development, community empowerment, and things like that. But essentially, I tried to take advantage of every opportunity to get additional work experience. And while we were actually at university, we founded what today is actually a Pan-African organization, youth organization. It's called Youth Action Initiative. And it was built on the idea of good governance, human rights, and democracy. And we used that opportunity to gain access to the legislature, to the executive. And we were running a lot of, student protests if there was a need to. We really more or less set up an organization from the school level that has morphed into a national organization, actually an African organization now. And that for me was the exposure to the international space, because I was the program manager and also the director for external relations. So I got the opportunity to travel to other countries, to promote the work of the organization, to meet other people. And in doing that, of course, it was experience not just in sharing ideas about what exactly the world's problems were, especially from the perspective of a young person, but also contribute to us building policies that were designed to empower youth. At the time, they were sponsored by the Open Society Foundation and National Democratic Institute. It's a US fund. So I would encourage you to try as much as possible. Don't underestimate any opportunity that you get. If it is something that you see value in and you're interested in, go for it, especially because now you do have the opportunity and the time, besides, you know, your coursework, to be able to try out different things. And when an employer, like sitting down now where I am, when I'm looking at a resume, for example, I'm really, for an entry-level lawyer, I'm not looking at, oh, whether you've worked 17 years or 18 years. I look at the diversity of experience that you have, because it tells me whether or not you're a dynamic and adaptable lawyer. And then I look at also like whether there's some kind of demonstrated interest. You know, if you've tried out different things, one thing will always kind of stand out, right? There will be something that stands out that shows really what you're about. And it's not something that I can easily know as maybe, let's say, as someone who is maybe a manager looking to employ. It's something that you would best experience, but you get an inkling of it from when you look at resumes, right? So I will tell you not to be scared, not to shy away from it, to actively pursue your interests and opportunities. And if it doesn't work out, at least you know it's not your thing, right? So then you move on. But there's always lessons to learn. And I feel that there's no experience that doesn't have value later on. It's just a matter of time and when it materializes.
She's dropping gems, you all. And it's something that Jean said earlier about being open to trying different things. And I'm sure we'll hear that echoed throughout all of your experiences. But I also took away, you said being intentional, and then you received a lot of exposure through the organization that you were a part of. What about you, Dia Priya?
I couldn't agree more. I think for me, it was an interesting journey because, like Elizabeth said, I didn't have any work experience. So I was thinking, someone just give me a job, right? So in my 1L year, I was really lucky that I ended up doing a fellowship for my 1L summer where I was working at Wigan and Dana in New Haven. But the second part of that fellowship was working as a legal intern at Yale New Haven Hospital in New Haven as well. So right from my first summer, I was able to kind of be in-house, as it were, as an intern. And it was an interesting experience because at the time, which is kind of already been said, I didn't have a particular interest in healthcare or healthcare law, but I thought, I don't know anything. So it's good to be there. It's good to learn. And I did learn a lot that summer, again, in terms of foundational legal skills. So it wasn't necessarily about the subject matter or what I liked, because I didn't know what I liked. It was about gaining those skills and gaining that exposure and being able to take that forward to the next thing. The next summer, I was in Big Law in New York, but in my 3L year, again, it was this idea that if you kind of can't necessarily find a seat at the table, you kind of bring your own table and sit down, right? So I decided I was going to do an externship, and I started applying everywhere. I was still very interested in human rights. And so I was applying to all these human rights organizations, and I finally got an externship at Amnesty International in New York. So that was super exciting as well. And what it taught me was, you know, I thought this was going to be all about human rights, but a 501c3 organization is still in many ways a corporate organization. And so you think you might know, you know, the kind of subject matter you're going to be dealing with, but as an attorney in-house, you really are focused on your businesses or your organization's objectives, both in the mission sense, but also in the corporate sense. So that was a big lesson for me there as well. And like Elizabeth said, and I'm sure we're going to continue to hear, it's just taking advantage of any opportunity that you are either given or that you make for yourself, and making sure that you are open. And as you explore those opportunities, you will learn more and more about what you like and dislike. But more than that, you will kind of hone your skills, and you'll be able to say, you know, not only identify your strengths, but you'll become a better lawyer for it anyway, because when you are able to identify your weaknesses as well, you can work on those. So that's kind of my internship journey.
And anytime that just people may not feel as comfortable going to the chair. My question to all of you is, how are you?
Thank you. I didn't know what was happening. Thank you, Dia Priya, for sharing your journey and your experiences. We'll have Jessica, and then Jean, you can tell us about what led you from law school early into your career.
So in law school, you know, I had during my 2 summers, I had 2 different summer internships. One was with the New York State Attorney General's office, and it was in the Environmental Protection Bureau. And, perhaps some of what we've heard is that first summer can be a little agonizing. You're not sure what you're going to do. I remember getting the internship very late in the year. And candidly, I had gotten it after I had applied for a fellowship, which provided funding for environmental summer internships. And so I had this money and I was like, I've got to find something to do in environmental law so that I can use the fellowship to get money over the summer. And so I went to the AG's office, and very similarly to what Dia Price said, I had no exposure to environmental law, but I learned so much. And a lot of what I focused on that summer was the impact of environmental law on corporations. So New York State Attorney General's office, probably one of the biggest Attorney General's office in the country, really was focused on cracking down on companies who were violating environmental laws, right? And so again, that's a different way to get at corporate law, to look at corporations. I think sometimes we very narrowly think being a corporate lawyer means the only way you can get that experience is by being in a corporation, in a traditional company. But there really are a lot of skills that you can gain, you can get a lot of perspective from being in other positions. So that was my first summer. My second summer, similar to Dia Prey, was also at a large New York law firm, Weil Gotshal, which you mentioned. And that was, really servicing corporate clients. And so that really gave me a real good insight into corporations, the type of disputes that corporations were dealing with, the firm was representing them in and handling it. And I guess the one thing I'll add is, for those who, at some point see themselves going into a corporation or being in-house counsel, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, is you never know where that opportunity is going to come from. It's very rare, I think, that people end up in-house simply because, they apply to a job that they see posted. Oftentimes, again, you're contacted by a client who you're working with, or someone who is already in-house that may know your skill set. And so I think, again, getting the different experiences will ultimately help you not only get the skills that you need to go in-house and to be successful, but will also help you develop the relationships and the networks to ultimately get there. And I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about networks and those types of things. But I think that's for me, it was a big part of getting here.
I looked for public interest law internships. There weren't any. So I ended up working for Judge Hughes, who I ended up clerking for 3 years later upon graduation. And I received a small public interest law stipend through the program that I did the internship. And then in the second year, I worked at, again, a boutique litigation firm. But really at that time, I was not even focused on corporations. I didn't even know what a general counsel was. I had no idea the difference between a plaintiff's firm and a defense firm. All I wanted to do was to really focus on improving our society and community, and litigation and impact litigation at certain organizations was like, I knew about Constitutional Law Center, right? And organizations like the Brennan Center that was coming about. I knew about those organizations. I knew almost nothing about the private sector, except that they paid more. So I should really consider that was an option. And the advice that I got from some professors and friends who actually had gone through law school and was practicing at a firm. So that's, my experience is limited. What I did just share in the chat with everyone is that for those of you who are still 1 or 2L, 2Ls, I think you would have completed your OCI process if you're interested in the private sector, but there are a lot of opportunities, fellowships that's posted on our website. Like hundreds. And we also get requests from corporations that are looking for 1Ls and 2Ls later in the game. So take a look at that page, and certainly we know all of them. So you can contact one of our folks for that opportunity if you're, interested in any of that. It's what everyone on this panel just said. It helps to know someone. Well, you do. So you can call somebody at MCCA, and if you contact me, we'll direct you to one of our folks who's managing that. The other resource I also shared, just so happens, is that we are doing a virtual career fair for early to mid-career lawyers. So early to mid-career, you're talking like right out of law school till about 8 years out. But within that career fair, there is a handful of opportunities for those of you who are getting ready to graduate. So 3 Ls. So if you're a 1L, 2L, do not register for the career fair. You will not have any success. You'll just be discouraged. And it's not because you're not qualified. You just have to be licensed. So it's about qualification. Sorry, let me correct myself on that. So I will share those opportunities. Again, our focus is to help break down the barriers within our profession that is constantly in your face, probably in every which way. There are also opportunities for students to attend some of our workshops in terms of reviewing resumes. I don't know how good your career services programs are, but one thing I do remember is that many people in career services have never really practiced law. So I'm not really sure how they're giving advice about your career, but what we have done as a result of learning that is to engage lawyers like the very distinguished panel you see on this Zoom, as well as some of our board members, general counsels who review a lot of resumes. Again, for the entry-level positions, you'll probably get a relatively early to mid-career lawyer looking at your resume to give feedback. But some of our GCs have signed up for those programs and literally have sat down and given feedback on your resume and how to anticipate some of the questions that may come about. So reach out to us for resources so that you are better prepared in case, there is an opportunity. Let's say you are interviewing with some big organization that is a member organization, and even if they're not, we do have a lot of networks. So part of this is to help you network. So I'll just share that resource and feel free to reach out. My contact is not online, but my EA's contact is, and she'll be able to help you or any of you who are interested in kind of learning more about us.
Thank you so much, Jean, and thank you for sharing those resources. Law students, 1Ls, 2Ls, 3Ls, y'all tap in and use this time and this energy, your time and your energy. She's giving it to you right here. So I'll move on. Let's switch gears a little bit. You talked about, talked briefly about having necessary skills. And I believe one of the strongest skills to kind of hone is networking. But tell me what you guys think. What are your top 2 or 3 skills that you feel law students and early career lawyers need? Let's start with Jessica.
I had a funny feeling that was coming towards me, Ebony. So definitely agree with you. I do think that networking is an important skill that you need to build. And it really is something that goes beyond just, a skill that goes beyond looking for a job or finding a job. So one example is as a law firm partner, if folks, if sort of a law firm is in your career at any point, one of the things that you do is deal with clients a lot. And, it's not always about the case that's at hand. Those are relationships that you build. And the better that you are, I think the more successful you will be, whether that means, getting more business or developing a relationship where a client ultimately does pick up the phone and say, we have an open position, we have we think you might fit this role. So there's value in creating those relationships. So I do think, and you can start that now. That's something that you can do, immediately. You start it on the first day of law school. You talk to people, you stay in touch, you figure out, how can I help this person? How can this person help me? How can I connect people? Who should I introduce to who? That's what's building a network is about. Someone just put in the chat, I don't know anyone and have become introverted. Any advice where to start? So again, just as I said, if you're in law school, I would encourage you to start with your law school classmates. Here I am, dare I say 16, 17 years out of law school. And my law school classmates have sent me job opportunities, have, put me or involved me in organizations, have been the source of business when I was at a law firm and had to generate business. So, again, you're in a big class, you don't have to get to know everyone in the association or maybe matter focused. I was in the public interest law student program when I was in law school. And so that to me was, again, a place where I could get to know people and over time create a network. What other skills? I think that it's really important that you develop your substantive law skills. I mean, you have to be a good lawyer. We can't run away from that, right? You have to know how to write. Have to know how to analyze the law. You have to know how to apply the law to the facts, whether you're dealing in the litigation context, whether you're dealing in the corporate context and you're dealing a deal. Can't emphasize that enough. You're
breaking up a little bit.
The nicest person, but no one is going to want to use some concern. Sorry about that.
Okay, I think you're good now.
There, is this a little better? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hopefully folks heard what I said about being a good lawyer. I think that that's just as important as being a good networker, if candidly, if not as important. So I think those are my two top skills.
Okay, Priya, what about you? What do you think?
For the networking piece, I'll add to what Jessica said. Another great way is through alums. So I find that alums of your school are always willing, well, no, let me not say always, so I not speak for them, but most of the time they're willing if you reach out and just say, oh, I'd like to learn more about this. Sometimes people kind of take a path of saying, oh, I want a job here. And that might be difficult, but if you just say, I want to learn more about what you do. And in that conversation, you find pathways for them to connect you with someone else, or if there are opportunities at their organizations, that's a bit more organic than saying, hi, I want a job here. Can you get me this job? So alums, Jessica mentioned about your law school classmates. Even when you're in school, I saw that you interned here last summer. How was that? Asking questions like that and getting a sense of other people's experiences. And then beyond that, you could also just go on LinkedIn or wherever and reach out to people. I always tell people the worst case scenario is that the person won't respond, right? But you weren't even talking to them to begin with, so you haven't really lost anything. Best case scenario is they will respond and you end up making a new connection. And so sometimes, despite introversion, I'm an introverted person myself, you kind of have to put yourself out there a little bit. You can't escape that. You can't kind of be a lawyer in isolation because you're an advocate, right? So you have to advocate for yourself as much as you're advocating for your clients. And then the second, I guess, thing in terms of a skill is empathy, but that empathy can present itself either in the form of human empathy if your client is a person, or just commercial awareness. So that's putting yourself in the shoes of your client and saying, what do they care about? Anyone can kind of look up the law, Google the law, and like Jessica said, you have to be able to apply it to your client's concerns. And that it's a big thing, because in law school, and it's not something that you learn overnight, you have to just kind of be aware of it and be thinking about, how do I apply this? How can I meet my client at their point of need? So that, and if you combine that with intellectual curiosity, just always auditing and asking questions and not taking anything you're given as pure facts, I think that'll help. So beyond just reading the books and saying, okay, now I know the law, it's important from the beginning, I think, and this is something that I wasn't necessarily the best at when I started. So I empathize with people who are thinking, oh, well, how do I do that? But you should always be thinking about, how do I apply this to what it is my client's objective is? And so when you show that interest in their business, in their cause, that itself it's a big skill and an important one.
Thank you. I never even thought about it like that, but that's a really good skill to point out. What about you, Elizabeth?
Thanks. Really, I think I'll echo what has been said so far. Something I would like to add is that you definitely want to build a network or the relationship before you need it. So I mean, you're in law school, and I guess you're thinking how to get into the labor market, etc. But when we talk, I backtrack a bit. When I first moved to the States, I'm Nigerian, right? And up until my master's, I studied and lived in Nigeria, and with exposure to other countries. But as a Nigerian, quite frankly, we're typically sociable. So for me, it was just getting to know people, building relationships was something I always enjoyed. And then I went to NYU, and then I got really exposed to networking. And for me, it was like, ooh, it was really too much. It was too structured. It was, and it took away the flair, right? And put a lot of pressure. So I had this, it was quite a conflicting time for me, because I didn't, I found it, sorry, that's my son. Quiet, please. Sorry, he just came in. So I had to kind of backpedal to think about how I wanted to go about it, because it was something I always did naturally, but then now it was something I had to do. And when you force something, sometimes it doesn't click, or sometimes you could find that you don't get you don't achieve the objective. So I had to think for myself how I wanted to approach it. And I tried to distance it from the idea of networking, because that put a lot of pressure and I saw it as more building relationships, right? Because that's what it is, right? And the skills or the strategies you would use to build personal relationships, quite frankly, apply to how you would build professional relationships. Like, there are the general don'ts, and then, but you have to put yourself out there. So what I would say is, and you're like, for example, in the personal space, you're not going to meet someone today and say, oh, can you buy me lunch, right? So when you're in the professional space, when you meet someone, you're not just, okay, I'm looking for a job, right? You have to build it. You have to build a relationship first. When I was in university, even professors that I wasn't taking their courses, if I read an article that the professor writes and I really love it, I will just look for the email and send it. And that was how I got the fellowship, right? It was not through a professor that I was taking his course. I was really interested in a paper that he wrote. I sent him an email. We met up for, he invited me for coffee. We went out, we had a chat, and that was how I built a relationship with him. And another instance was, I just went, I went for an event at Clary Gottlieb. It was for, those interested in big law, and I wasn't. But I thought, well, it's interesting. You're going to meet lawyers. At the end of the day, we're all lawyers, right? And we have different practice areas, but you never know where life takes you. So I went in there, and this is how I got one of my really lifetime mentors. I'm still not in big law. He's in big law, but in the elevator, I was munching on something, and quite instinctively, I just said, would you like to try some? And he was like, what is that? And I was really enjoying it. So I found myself selling that product to him. I'm not a business person, but I really wanted him to try it. And he tried it, and I didn't know who he was, quite frankly. And we just got chatting off the elevator, and he gave me his card. And he was a partner at Clary Gottlieb. And this was how we got to know each other. And, he's exposed me to opportunities. And so you really should work on, I think the prayer has mentioned putting yourself out there. You're never going to lose. Let me put it this way. You're never going to lose, but really build the relationships before you need them, because nobody likes the feeling of being used, but everybody likes the feeling of I lifting someone up, because they see value in the person. They've gotten exposed to the person. And today, I'm not going to vouch for someone that I don't have confidence in, right? So the confidence is gained through that relationship prior. And if you want someone to recommend you for a job, they have to know you, right? So build up to it, because they also have reputation to protect, right? So they need to know who they're recommending. They need to know, you have to easily come to their mind when an opportunity comes. And you really get that through that prior exposure to them.
Thank you. Y'all have been dropping some gems. I hope the students are picking up on it. And it's a recurring theme, putting yourself out there. And I just take that to mean just be bold. Like someone said, the worst thing they can say is no. So Jean, tell me about your top couple of trades or skills that you seek, or that early law students or people early in their career should have.
Sure, and the panelists had said a lot of really fantastic things. So I'll give you practical tip one. So on Zoom, it's very easy to not turn on the camera. It's a Saturday, turning on your camera. I'm going to remember. So when you reach out to me, I'm going to know. Or asking a question. I know Cherie said something, Diane said something, and Ebony is at moderating the panel. So that's how you network. So those are some tips I would suggest. It's easy. So when Ebony reaches out and said, hey, I moderated this panel that you were on, or Jessica or Diapre or Elizabeth, we were on a panel together. I'm looking at this opportunity. I see that you're connected to this person, and I'm connected to a lot of people. So that's probably the one thing I bring in terms of value. I networked probably, as some people have said and some GCs have said, I have probably one of the best networks because I've worked at it. But those are some practical tips I will give just here. So if any one of the panelists reaches out to me for an opportunity that they're exploring because they want to move their careers in one direction or another, I'm going to remember them because we're on this call. And the other thing is, for those of you who are here, I mean, we can't see hundreds of you asking a question, making a comment. I'm going to remember those names. So rather than, not participating, not being engaged, I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to also turn on your camera when you have these sorts of Zooms, because that's another easy way to network, to be seen. Because especially for lawyers of color, that's the number one thing we realized when we went into the Zoom world 2 years ago, is that out of sight, out of mind. So you have to be seen. How are you seen? Don't do a conference call when you have an opportunity to connect with people face to face. So those are some of my kind of practical tips. I would say that, if you're an introvert, you don't have to speak, but you can turn on your camera and we can see you. And asking that question, now I'm going to remember you. So that's another easy way to network with people.
Look at that. Someone's already taking the advice. I love it. I love it. So I know a couple of you have international experience throughout your career. I have a friend and colleague who is interested in going to Japan and just kind of doesn't know how to even go about that route. So tell me how you all that have gone the international route, how do you go about with connecting in a different country? Even if you're from that country, if you're not from that country, how do you network and connect and make those connections, internationally?
I can start if it's helpful. The first thing I think is seeking out opportunities. So beyond going to Nigeria, at some stage, I was looking at international clerkships, and I got one at the Supreme Court of Namibia. I got another one at the Constitutional Court of South Africa, but because I did the research and I was looking for those, ultimately I didn't take them. But I think the first thing is actually doing your research and figuring out what opportunities are out there. The second thing I would say candidly is I always encourage people to take risks. I do, but evaluating your situation. So making sure you're not living someone else's life. So making sure that you are in a position to go wherever it is that you say you want to go. Some people, for financial reasons or because they have a family, you evaluate your risk tolerance and your situation and figure out if that's something that you want to do. And then if you decide that it is something that you want to do, you have to commit to it wholly, right? So sometimes we find that we're in one place and we're kind of thinking, you want to have regret minimization. So you have to commit to it wholly and say, I'm going to go spend the next year or 2 years or whatever amount of time in this place, and I'm going to lean into that experience. So I have forfeited the big law salary or whatever it is that I've forfeited being close to my family in the US or wherever else to go and take this opportunity because I have a very clear sense of what I'm going to gain for it or what I stand to gain from it. So I think just it's taking it those steps one by one, doing the research, again, networking, you could network your way into that, making sure that the opportunity is right for you, having done that assessment. And then when you get there, lean into it because that's where you are. And recognize you might not be losing anything at all, so which would be fantastic, but recognize why you're doing it and kind of take that opportunity as, you know, an exciting time in your career, because sometimes people find that it's not something that they can do at various stages for various reasons. So when you do have that kind of opportunity, I always encourage people to just lean into it.
And add to what the prayer has said, certainly taking advantage of opportunities and leaning in, you definitely can't go wrong with that. Just to add to what you said, when I was in law school, I was really always actively looking for how to travel out. Like I was constant, and you know, there are always these international student conferences, moot court competitions, you name it, I did it all, right? So I was, before getting out of law school, I knew I was interested in working internationally. And so for example, I went for an international law students conference in Brazil. Then I went for human rights moot court in the US. We were starting out this youth organization, I traveled to many African countries. And that experience came very valuable for me when I wanted to make the move career-wise, right? Because at least from those of us working with international organizations, when you're looking at a resume, you're looking at potential candidates, you're really looking at the exposure they've had, right? Because frankly, like having the hard skills is like the basic, it's the barest minimum. And when there is a position, it's at least in international organizations, all the people applying are going to meet the minimum requirements. And then you're going to have people that we call overachievers that have so much more to offer. So you're competing with a pool of really highly competent people and any one of them could fit into the role in terms of the hard skills. So most employers are going to be looking for what else? What's that special thing? What's the additional thing that this candidate has that other candidate doesn't necessarily have? And in the context of an international organization, is that exposure. You can get it from, like Dipri is saying, just, saying 1 year, I'm going to go work in, Japan, for example. You've never been there, doesn't matter. You have that 1 year. It's not a waste. You're investing it into something you're interested in, and you will learn a lot. You will expand your network. I have to say that a big part of my network now really still includes people that I met back when I was a student. And now these people are in different stages of their career. They really have high profile careers. Some of them, it keys you in and you remain connected into such, of course you have to put in the work to keep the relationship going, right? Because you don't see them every day, but that experience and maintaining it over the years kind of really places you on a pedestal that exposes you to where you want to be. So you have to take advantage of it now. I mean, even if your school or no organization in your school is planning any of these trips or study abroad programs or whatever, you can look yourself and see what you can do. And then secondly, I don't know if many people take advantage of their professors. Like I have to say that my career really, my professors have played a very huge role in my career. And when I say professors, I don't mean all of those that I took their courses, including those I didn't take their courses. These are people that are academics first. So they will give you that academic guidance and that, intellectual, stimulation. But beyond that, and when you work in law schools, you get exposed to really fine faculty, right? They really have, and a lot of them practice law outside the confines of the university. And a lot of them, for example, some of my professors worked with international organizations. So this was for me also another area that I was intentional about. I made sure that I got to know my professors and the work that they do. I offered to be their intern, like just research. I wasn't paid at all. I just wanted that exposure. Like we had a professor that came in from Israel, and he was working on land rights and land grabbing in Africa. And I was like, you know, I'm an African. I understand the context. I'm sure that I will figure out how to go about this. And he may be a very fine faculty, but he may not necessarily have the contextual background that I would have to Africa, right? So I offered to do that. And fast forward down the line, you know, when I was looking to start my PhD, it was this professor I reached out to, right? Because I was like really rusty from, it was a long time after law school, and how many of your professors would remember you, right? So it's about really being, when you're intentional about it and taking advantage of creating also your opportunities and trying to maintain those networks that you've built, because you remain fresh in people's minds. And when something comes down the line, they're gonna think, oh, Elizabeth, oh, she was in this country. I'm pretty sure that she'll know how to, even if you're not a national, right? They would, this thing. So that's what I'll say about that.
Ebony, I just want to sort of jump in and give a slightly different perspective. So I was born in the US. I was raised in the US. I didn't get my passport until I was in college, when I was going abroad for my semester away. My parents didn't have passports. The first time they had left they left the US was to visit me when I was doing my study abroad. So, you know, I was my life was largely US based. But what I learned in college and then continued in law school was that we are part of this global world. And so even if you don't sort of, you know, have the opportunity to go live abroad or spend something, how do you become sort of a global citizen? You know, read different newspapers, read different outlets, news outlets, learn about what's going on in the world, and figure out how to, even if it's not professionally, engage in that, you know, in those global efforts, in those global activities. And so fast forward to my life, you know, in many ways, although I've never lived outside of the continental US except for my semester abroad in college, I consider myself an international lawyer. And I saw it most in my career when I was at a law firm. I was a part of the International Bar Association. I regularly did trips out of the US for clients and for marketing purposes. You know, I developed a lot of relationships. One thing I want to talk about is language. If you have language skills, hone those. I am a fluent Spanish speaker. And so I was able to go to South America, Central America, Latin America, Spain, speak the language, develop relationships with people when they had an issue in the US, or when they had a client who needed lawyers in different countries to respond to a global investigation. People would call me. And I would work with teams of other lawyers across the globe. So there are different ways to sort of, you know, get that international experience, get that international exposure, and create that international profile. So I just want to give folks a different perspective. I had a unique opportunity when I was leaving the government to potentially move to South America and open up a law firm's office in Sao Paulo. It was ultimately something I couldn't do, right? I did the risk analysis that Dia Prey talked about, and I had a young child at that point. My spouse's career would force us to live apart. And it was something that I decided I couldn't do, but I decided that is something that I still want to be a part of my profession and my career as a law firm partner. So how do I do it? And, you know, I did it. I had clients in Sao Paulo. I traveled regularly there and in other places. So again, if it's something that people feel like they can't do, they can't go somewhere and live there for 6 months or a year or 2 years. That's not to say that you can't have an international career and international, you know, clients. You certainly can, and I think there are other ways of going about it. And on the language skills, you know, I learned Spanish growing up in my house from my parents and my grandmother, and I like to say, if you have a language skill, certainly hone it. I think that will help you be more marketable, as Elizabeth said. You know, you just bring that additional thing to the table when you do. And for me, it meant that I took a legal Spanish class. I wanted to learn legal Spanish so that I could read legal documents, so that I could understand legal concepts, so that I could speak with lawyers who had been trained in other countries in the Spanish language. and not sort of feel any different or be any less qualified than anybody else. So those are just a couple of other tips that I would throw out to folks that are thinking about international careers.
Thank you for that alternative perspective, because I wasn't even thinking about that, but I'm sure others weren't either. So thank you for enlightening us with that. And thank you, Dia Preya and Elizabeth, for sharing your international experience as well. We have questions in the chat. I want to take time to make sure. Oh, it looks like Jean has been answering the questions. Thank you, Jean. If anybody wants to come off mute and ask a question, you can do that now. If not, I'll just continue on. I have several questions I can ask, but I just want to make sure I'm okay. So nobody wants to come off mute.
There's actually a question I would like to answer. Yeah, someone asked the question about whether it's worth it doing an LLM after the JD, especially if you want to go corporate. So it's when you were thinking corporate, it's an additional degree, right? The LLM is an additional degree. And quite frankly, if you have a JD, you already have an undergrad, right? So another degree in a different field, you really have to think about whether there's value in that. And for me, taking the LLM was because I was really interested in international law. And I didn't have, I took a course in international law when I was doing my LLB, but that isn't enough, right? So I use that. Yes, you use that as a way to get specialized knowledge. However, if your end game is really to go corporate in-house, I would tell you to do an MBA instead. I mean, because frankly, when you're looking to work in-house and you want to be intentional about it, many people stumble into in-house from the diversity of experience that they've had. And I think that has, that's what most of my panelists here have said. But if this is something you've already, a field you've already identified as something of interest to you, then you have to design your path right into that. And as an in-house counsel now, what I have to tell you is that you have to know the business. You have to know business. And that is what many lawyers may not necessarily know. And so you need to gain the hard skills there as well. And what better way to do it than an MBA as opposed to an LLM? Because if you already have the JD, you really don't need an additional LLM in corporate law. You should really looking at putting yourself in a business environment. And that has many benefits. Of course, beyond the fact that you're going to know the business and coupling that with your legal skills, that would make you formidable in and out. But that also puts you within the platform that you want to be, because corporates are run by business people. And when you're in business school, you're basically positioning yourself in the environment that you want to work in, and you have the opportunity to show them. And I think that many of us that didn't go the route of, being business people before we started supporting businesses, international organization business and code, we had to learn it from ground up, right? And it makes a difference for business people, for CEOs, whether a lawyer is someone they can see as someone I want to go to, or whether it's a lawyer that they want to, just hide what they're doing from. And if you're working in-house, if you know the business, what you're going to be doing is being a solutions person. You're using your legal skills to provide solutions. The businesses, they have the ideas. They may not know how to go about it in a legally sound way. And so that's where, and so if you know the business and you have the legal skills, that really sets you as, a very prime candidate for in-house. And then you don't then need to go and do LLM in corporate law, because when you find yourself in the space and you have you're qualified as a business person as well, you're really good to go. And all you need to do is, the learning curve that comes with working with a corporate for the first time, right? Or any employer, quite frankly, for the first time.
Thank you for pointing that out, because a lot of people want to, just keep going. I just want one more degree to set me apart. But like you said, the type of degree that you get matters. So an MBA, especially if you want to go corporate. I'm not going to repeat everything you just said, but I just thought that was great. Okay, Ambrose, you can come off mute and ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time today and sharing all this wisdom and knowledge with us. My question is in regards to experiences. So I've did my 1L summer working in a corporate setting, and I've been working on an externship during the school year with a firm. I'm interested in trying to broaden my experience and working with going into like the criminal justice system, working with the defender's office, prosecutor's office to gain some experience and understand how that legal process works in that setting a little bit better, as well as getting that courtroom experience. So what is any of your input on the value of missing out on another, maybe saying another corporate experience in maybe a different firm, vice going away from that setting and going into a totally different area of the law?
So I'm going to jump in if it's okay, Ebony, just because I guess I'm the one who sort of spent time in the criminal justice system. Look, if you sort of remember, I started out at the AG's office, did big law, then went to clerkship, then landed at a prosecutor's office. And so I would say, and I think the other panelists have said this, is you should pursue whatever you're interested in. You are going to gain valuable skills from whatever you do. And you have to, whatever you do, you have to be passionate about it and then lean into it, because that's the only way you're going to get the most out of your experience. And so I think I think there's nothing wrong with, getting an externship or an internship, at a defender's office or with an organization that might be aligned with your interests, to test out the waters, see if you're interested in it. I highly recommend clerkships. Clerkships, are a great opportunity to see a lot of different areas of the law and get a bit more of a flavor about whether or not you're interested in a particular thing or not interested in it. So when I clerked, it was an appellate court. And so we saw all types of different types of cases. We saw immigration cases, we saw criminal law cases, we saw corporate cases. You can do an internship or an externship with a judge while you're in law school. You can do it during the summer. I know there are a lot more opportunities to do that. I did my clerkship after working at a large law firm. So I went to Weil, I spent a year at Weil. And then while I was at Weil, I interviewed and I got my clerkship offer, left the law firm and went and did that, and sort of never went back to big law. So I think, again, I wouldn't rule anything out if you have the desire to do something. I would try it, see if it works, and you'll see where your path takes you. And the other thing I'll say is sort of the flip of that is, if you decide to sort of stay in a corporate type role, whether it's at a law firm, whether it's at a corporation, there are a lot of ways, a huge number of ways to have an impact in those areas, to give back by doing pro bono work. So, again, those interests don't necessarily need to be completely squandered if you do end up in a more traditional corporate role, whatever that may be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks for your question, Ambrose. Diane, and then I want to go, I think there's some more questions in the chat, so we'll go to the chat. Go ahead, Diane.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists for being here today. My question is more, student specific for myself. I'm a 3L currently at Campbell Law. And ever since, I thought about becoming a lawyer, I wanted to go to in-house counsel. My first internship experiences were in-house, but, constantly being told by my sponsors and stuff that I should diversify and think about law firms, starting there first rather than in-house, it kind of kept me from pursuing in-house roles and pursuing in-house internships. I have, like a wealth of experience, with legal services, and I did some government internships while I was in school, but, how do you get back on that course if you strayed? So for instance, Jean mentioned the new, I'm sorry, the conference or the job fair that's coming up. And so I would love to get into that, but what does it actually look like once you get there? Once you actually get back on the track, right? And start going for those in-house roles, are they actually looking at, fresh out of law school folks? And if not, how do I make myself, more attractive to employers in that regard, since I'm gonna be.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good afternoon.
So
Good afternoon.
Welcome to my little
And
breakout room.
somebody,
That's the end of my question.
I'll do a little intro, I guess.
hold on, y'all. Somebody needs to mute.
You're freezing.
Okay, there we go. All right, thanks for your question, Diane. Any one of the panelists can answer Diane's question.
I'll just take the first stab and welcome anyone else's suggestions. I know that there are major corporations. I'm pretty sure I saw something from Google and I think Amazon, because you are all a huge sponsor of every career job, something that we do. So there are definitely organizations that are leaning towards some fresh out of law school students. Most corporations, however, have not done that. There's probably been a trend since about 2016 for more, the straight from law school to corporations for some of the early entry level positions. If going in-house is your ultimate goal, however, I would really encourage you to spend at least a couple of years working at a law firm if possible. Now, having said that, we had a young lawyer who came straight from law school to MCCA. We needed somebody to deal with some of our basic privacy issues that were happening that escalated more as years went by. He's now at Yum Brands, which is a Fortune 500 company, and he's an international lawyer. He's never been really outside of the country except to visit, for vacation. He's born here in the United States. So to Jessica's point, I do think there are other ways. And now he's an international privacy lawyer for Taco Bell. So, and he started his career with us as a contracts lawyer, managing all of our vendor contracts. And even though we're a small nonprofit, we have a lot of those. And even though I'm a lawyer, I don't have time to look at all of those contracts and negotiate them. So there are many different ways, but probably the easiest and the most linear way, if you wanted to follow it, is to go to a law firm.
If I can just add to what Jean said, I totally agree that you definitely want to have law firm experience first. However, if you find yourself in a situation where as you're graduating law school, you get an offer from a corporate, I think that you could still explore that, because one of the benefits of being in-house is that you immediately get a chance to prove, to show yourself and your skills. And I've found that many lawyers in-house really love mentoring, right? So if you find a lawyer, you find yourself in that space, you should immediately find a lawyer that can mentor you in the business. And then let's say 1 or 2 years or 3 years down the line, then you can take a leave of absence and go work in a law firm. You will still be marketable to law firms, because law firms, especially the corporate law firms, you are basically coming from a client, right? So they see an opportunity there, they see value there, because you're working for who would typically be their clients. And clients get comfort from knowing that a lawyer that knows what they do and how they do and what they want is handling their business. So you would still be able to find placement to an extent with law firms that are specialized in such areas. And that gives you an opportunity to further hone your skills and then go back to the in-house, or maybe not. So it's the traditional path would be, you should definitely get law firm experience, because it makes it easier to break into the in-house market. But if you happen to have that opportunity, then if you're interested in it, don't throw it away, try it out, and then create an opportunity to go into that space so that you can leverage that law firm experience as well.
I think that, Diane, the value in perhaps spending a little bit of time at a law firm is you can you can likely get a breadth of exposure to different things, different types of clients, different types of work, and you may stumble upon, geez, I'm really interested in this and not that. I like corporate, I like litigation, I like this particular substance area. And so when you're applying typically to larger companies, the roles tend to be, in a specific type of area. And if you can have some experience, even if it's only one case, but geez, I really enjoyed this type of case that dealt with employment law. And so now you're looking at a role in-house that's an employment role, you can draw that bridge. Whereas if you go straight in, you'll certainly, your career will advance, you'll do different things, you'll move around the legal department and be exposed to different things, but you're sort of jumping into a specific role right away. So I think that's another reason, or another thing to consider when you're weighing the two options.
Thank you, ladies, for those responses. And thank you, Diane, for your question. We have exactly 5 minutes. So we'll take these last 2 questions, and then our panelists can give their final remarks. Go ahead, William.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you to all the panelists for hosting this thing for us. So my question and a bit of a worry for me is, how can I get into the international space or international corporate law space, coming from like a tier 3, tier 4 law school? Now, I do have I'm a 10-year Army vet, so I do have experience working abroad, and my degree, I have an undergrad degree in economics. So I figure as though those two will help me, but the side school that I come from, or just the notoriety of the school, I was worried about how I can make myself more marketable from that school.
So I'll echo what I said before very briefly. I went to a tier 3 school. So, I looked for the opportunity to travel when I could on my own, meet lawyers that are abroad, connect with some of those international organizations, the International Bar Association. For me, it was the Hispanic Bar Association, the National Bar Association. There are a lot of different groups out there who have conferences in different countries that you can go to. You start to meet other lawyers. And again, depending on where you work, if you work at an entity that has an office somewhere else, or, asked to go. I was at Weil Gotshal, and I asked them if I could go to their London office as part of my summer. And they said yes. So it doesn't have to be, 6 weeks. It can be, I'm working with a lawyer who's in this country, is there an opportunity to travel there for a week or 2 weeks, right? I think you want to look for the small things. Sometimes we sort of want it to be big and grand. Again, those small experiences in your background is going to be really helpful, and marketing yourself as someone who does have that international experience already, I think is going to be very helpful for you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you kindly.
Thank you. And our national AG, thanks.
Thank you, Ebony. I appreciate it. Great work. You've been outstanding for the organization this year. I'd like to thank our panelists for coming out and sharing with us. My question is real quick. When I started, I'm a 2L at Northern Illinois University. And when I started law school, I really was into public interest. I still am. I'm going to take a position with the county prosecutor's office this summer. My question, I hear a lot about experience with law firms. To be honest, that doesn't really interest me, but I'm really interested in corporate law. Seems like contracts and business are like my thing. And I didn't realize it until I got into my second year. So what kind of advice, I know Ms. Ortiz, it sounds like your pathway is kind of similar to what I'm on right now. I'd like some advice to how do you get that other experience, or can you translate the experience in a prosecutor's office into corporate and into banking and capital ventures and stuff like that?
I mean, yes, I think most corporations, every corporation is subject to some type of regulation. Certain industries are more highly regulated than others. Guess who regulates them? The prosecutors, the regulators, the SECs of the world. And ultimately, when they do something wrong, the prosecutors walk in to try to make the wrong right. So I think it's important for you, while you're doing your work in the prosecutor's office, that you continue to maintain your connections, continue to, stay immersed in the markets and what's going on in corporate America, and hone those skills. And I think a lot of corporations are now, creating positions that focus on, compliance. There's a lot of focus on compliance internally, being good citizens, whether it's, there's just I think every corporation has a very big portfolio of how do we have to operate in compliance with the law. And there are so many roles in there. And so I think the experience that you gain as a prosecutor is most easily sort of fit into those roles. So, what I tell people all the time, and I think my closing words, because I won't talk again, is, I'm always looking at job postings. I'm always looking at, what's out there, because part of what you want to be doing is thinking 2 steps ahead. It's not that you're 1 foot out of the door. It's how am I going to gain the skills here that are going to continue to help my career in the future. So that's a big piece of advice that I give people. Think about what might interest you in 5 years, in 7 years, and go out and talk to people that are doing those jobs, so that you get the skills you need now and you can work on that now.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Jessica, for those parting words. Jean and Elizabeth, thank you for handling the chat for me. I appreciate it. Let's go with our final parting words. We know we just heard from Jessica. Dia Priya, what do you have to say to our attendees? What do you want to leave them with?
I'll echo what Jessica said in terms of, I think it's really important to zoom out sometimes. And just because you're in one place now, one thing that this panel, I think, has emphasized and that I continue to learn throughout my career, it doesn't mean that you can't move, you can't keep advancing, you can't keep growing, you can't keep changing. One thing that's certain in life is change. So I don't want anyone to feel just because they're in one place doesn't mean that they can't get to somewhere else. It's important to zoom out, think about what you might be interested in, keep those connections, and find different ways to express that interest, whether it's joining organizations, meeting new people. And ultimately, remembering that it's a journey. I know people say that a lot, but it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Hopefully we all have very long careers ahead of us. And so the hope is that you'll get a chance to do every single thing you want to do. Maybe not at the same time, but at various points in your career. So congratulations to everyone. Law school is not easy. And I encourage everyone, especially in times like these, to just kind of keep the faith, keep working hard. Remember that you're there to learn. No one expects you to be perfect right now. And I wish everyone all the best in their careers.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Sure, thank you. This has been a very interesting panel. And for me, I love to attend such discussions because it's also always an opportunity for me to reflect on my journey, and it helps also to inform what my next steps are. And, so we're all, I don't want the law students to feel like, we're somewhere, we're also still on our journeys, right? So it's just, we're at different stages of the journeys. And I think I want to focus my parting words on the importance of building soft skills. In law school, you're going to learn the hard skills that you need, and maybe some soft skills along the way, but there's no course that really focuses on all the soft skills that you need as a lawyer, and especially if you're going in-house, right? So you really need to start thinking about what kinds of soft skills are important in the space that you want to work in, and start working on them now. Many people you hear this day say that people forget what, you may forget what people did to you, but you will hardly forget how they made you feel. And that's very important because that's where the soft skills comes from. People need to be able to remember you in a positive way. And when you're working in-house, part of your job as a lawyer really is to be a bridge builder. You need to be able to connect and converge different opinions, different interests, conflicting ones sometimes, And you're not able to do that with hard skills. You're only able to do that with soft skills. So please invest in that. Find platforms that help you to hone that. A good way to do that also is maintaining relationships and having mentors that are like a constant in your career, where you can interact with them, that can expose you to different spaces and opportunities, so that when you're kicking it out of law school, you don't only have the hard skills, but you're going to hit the ground running in terms of knowing how to behave and knowing how to interact with people, and already knowing the human aspects of business. And that's really, really critical, especially for a lawyer. So I wish you all the best in completing your law school, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions, especially if you're interested in the international organization space. I've been in the space for quite a while now, and so I'll be able to give you some insights about how to start a career there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we'll round it out with Jean.
Sure. I'll go back to kind of 4 things that we all talked about. Be curious. I think, Diapre, you said that. I say that to every single lawyer, even people who come to me who are interested in becoming the next general counsel of a major corporation. You have to be curious. If you're not, it's going to make life a lot harder. So being curious, being accountable. I think that's another comment that some of the panelists mentioned. To yourself and your career. Take calculated risks and embrace constructive feedback. That is the one thing, and we have research on this, that women and people of color, especially for people of color, it is a race issue. A lot of people of color do not get constructive feedback until it is too late. So don't take, and of course, think about the intent. Don't take constructive feedback as that person is, taking a whack at me or whatever it is that you feel at the moment. Take it for what it's worth. Why am I getting this constructive feedback? How can I do better? That's the only way you're going to do excellent lawyering. And if somebody is taking the time to actually give you constructive feedback, they want you to do better. They believe in you to do better. So embrace constructive feedback, because that's one of the things that we are really focused on, is improving the number of diverse lawyers in our profession. We can't do that unless you take that yourself. Embrace it. It's the accountability that I think Diapre and Jessica and Elizabeth all talked about throughout this past hour or so. So embrace constructive feedback, be accountable, be curious, and of course, always do excellent work. And again, reach out, register for some of the things that I've already sent to you. Good luck.
Thank you all so much for joining today. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I will be reaching out to all of you on LinkedIn to connect. Yeah, have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for moderating.
Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ebony, you are outstanding. You did an outstanding job for us this year. Just even looking at the numbers and the amount of work and fundraising you did. I don't know what you're going to do in the future, but if I ever run for president, I'm going to be looking for you as a campaign fundraiser.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
You're in your 3L year, or you're?
No, I have one more year.
Are you running for anything in this upcoming term?
No, I'm a part of the Southwest region. I'm a treasurer for Southwest region. So my position is already solidified for my final year.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of be a quasi, like, help out. I'm really pushing voter protection. So I'm going to kind of do something within the organization on voter protection, but not hold a position. But I'll always be around. So we'll talk. And plus, I plan on coming into your region. I didn't get to travel this year, but I'm going to travel next year because I'll have more time. So
we'll meet up. We'll be in Baton Rouge for the regional convention this year. So
that would be great, because my son and my grandson are down there, so I'll get to hang out. Plus, it's always good to see some of those Southern Jaguars wear all my Grambling gear to harass.
I'm gonna let you make it.
Yeah, well, I'm a Grambling person, so I mean, I can't help it. We're cool until Bayou Classic and Step Show.
You're right. You're right.
Take it easy. I'll see you later on tonight at the gala.
All right. Thank you for joining.
No doubt.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ebony Cormier, you are absolutely amazing. You are a phenomenal facilitator and such an encouraging and empowering woman that we all aspire to be like. So thank you for your leadership, your courage, and for bringing us a panel of women who are able to give us a diverse experiences. So kudos to you, and we're excited about your future and can't wait to see what's in store for you.
Ooh, don't make me cry. I got my makeup done. Thank you. I appreciate it. And they're about to log us out. So